Okay. Hello, Martin Paver. I just wanted to have a quick chat to you. Obviously, we've spoken a bit, but really interesting stuff that you're doing at Projecting Success, and just wanted to share with people what you're doing and what you're up to, and just the Projecting Success story. So first of all, just a bit about yourself and a little bit about Projecting Success and the company.
For the opportunity, really appreciate it. My name is Martin Paver. I'm a chartered engineer and a project manager. I've worked on some big projects ranging from portfolios all the way through to billion-dollar nuclear infrastructure projects with a team of 220. So I've done all sorts of work. I've worked in the public sector, I've worked in the private sector, and I've also worked for myself. I set a company up called Projecting Success 4 years ago, and since then I've been doing work both as a project manager, and that was working on some big portfolios, multi-billion-pound portfolio, which I was leading. And more recently, I pivoted the company in 2017, late 2017, and I've now started to focus it more around project data analytics. And the reason for that is I've worked in project management all of my life, and I've seen that we tend to make the same mistakes time and time again. We don't learn from them, and all of that experience of project management is all lost. So Projecting Success is all about trying to mobilize that argument and trying to get people to focus on it so we can do something cool with it.
Awesome.
So that's the background to the story, Nick. So that's the sort of you're looking for.
So it's applying data science and analysis to project management. So really quite transformative, and that's why it was interesting to me as well. Is because this is really feels new, and I don't think there's many people out there that are doing this.
So the size of the opportunity in the UK, it's £600 billion is going to be spent in the next 10 years on major infrastructure projects.
Yeah.
If you look at that globally, it's $100 trillion. So if we can just save 1% of that number, it's a massive number. And I'm confident, and it's not just about looking at things like lessons learned, for instance, because they tend to be these trite statements. It's more about all that interconnected data set of experience and using that to predict what's going to go wrong on a job. Yeah. So if you know that things have gone wrong in the past, you can then start to predict those in the future. So certain projects and certain organizations have got a predisposition to failure, and it's understanding that and characterizing it. And if we do that, I'm sure we can save a lot more than 1%. And this is not just recycling it into profit. There's some of these projects which are social care projects, hospitals, schools, etc. But this is making sure that those borderline projects are now delivered, and it will change society as well. So I think the opportunity is phenomenal. Really good, exciting.
Yeah. Awesome. And I was going to say as well that there are going to be, it's not a slam dunk, it's not an easy thing. It is quite a few challenges that you're going to see in the adoption of this into companies. And so, I mean, that also is quite exciting for data scientists as well as for business leaders and project managers as well.
Yeah, and I think those challenges are significant. So I think the biggest challenge at the moment is just data, getting hold of data. And there's a lot of organizations who's got project data and they won't share it because it's sensitive. And it's sensitive because there might be some reputational damage in there. They've done something where the project's probably not gone to plan, or there's some commercial data in there. So it might be cost data, it might be about key suppliers or whatever. There's data which they've got from a client, which is all tied up with non-disclosure agreements, etc. So they can't actually share some of that data. So if we've not got the data, we can never make this work. So what we need to do is to demonstrate the benefit of this sort of arrangement so people feel a lot more confident about sharing data. And even then, I don't think it's going to be open source data ever, because there's going to be things which are commercially sensitive. So what we need to do is to work up the commercial construct and the data architecture such that you can put NDAs on certain parts of this data, and some of it's going to be open. So it's going to be certain stratas of data based upon its sensitivity.
And it seems to me as well, from my background in actuarial studies and working in insurance, it seems like it's similar to like reinsurance, I guess, where you might some really rare events. Like you might have something where you're trying to work out the cost of, say, an airplane crash event or something like that. But even in Australia, that's quite a rare event. But then if you were to pool the data globally, you would be able to get some significant numbers to be able to do some modelling on some of those events. So even within your organisation, the project failure, you may only have run a project like it 4 or 5 times, but then if you are able to aggregate that data and anonymise it, then there are huge opportunities to learn from everyone else and to be able to avoid some of those mistakes.
It's a superb analogy, that, Nick. I think that in the sort of world of project management, there's this language about black swan events, and a chap called Nassim Taleb wrote a great book about it a few years ago, and there's been some further work done since, and Oxford Business School did some work into IT projects about 3 or 4 years ago, and they found that 1 in 6 projects was this black swan project, and it's something that's gone probably 100% over budget or over schedule, and it's gone really, really pear-shaped. And they're saying that 1 in 6 of those projects are black swan events. Now, the definition of a black swan event is something that is very improbable and you can't forecast it.
Yeah.
And I'd like to challenge that and say, is it not forecastable because it's not in your sphere of vision, or is it not forecastable because it's a totally random event? Yeah. And I would argue that 1 in 6 of those IT projects is forecastable and it's knowable. Yeah. It's all about vision and perspective. And as a project manager, if you've only delivered 10 projects in your life, that's the extent of your vision. If you've delivered every single project in the world, because that's what the data set is, that vision is then opened up. I'm working with companies at the moment, and they're saying, what we need to do, Martin, is to work up a management dashboard that gives me some insights into X, Y, Z. I would argue that we don't need dashboards in the future. We need AI, which says to us, these are the things you need to be alert to. And it's a bit like your car. Back in the old days, you'd have an oil pressure gauge, you'd have an oil temperature gauge, etc. You don't need that anymore. You just want a light that says it's outside of tolerance or it's inside of tolerance. And that tolerance is depending upon your type of project, etc., because that's the predisposition to failure.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's really exciting in terms of once you start to think about the bigger vision, it's transformational.
Yeah, and even like projects like this at this particular milestone had these following problems. So these are things to look out for. Or if you're tracking this way and you're making this decision, then projects that look like this ended up being this late or ended up being this much over budget. So you need to take this corrective action to be able to prevent that from happening. It could be almost like that, which is extraordinary.
If you look at a number of project managers at the moment, there's tens of thousands of project managers around the world. Now, from my perspective, if you start to automate some of those project management jobs, because you can now say, for instance, all the reporting work, you can start to pull that through data science. Your risk management. So instead of having a full-time risk manager on a job, you probably want a data analyst or a data scientist working with you who's crunching all of that data and saying, these are the things that's probably going to go wrong on a job. Yeah. Your scheduling, for instance, do you want a scheduler or do you want a data scientist stroke data analyst working with you saying, I'm not going to guess what this next part of the project's going to be. I've now got all this data I can pull through, and now I can start to distribute that and say, this is what I think is going to happen next. So from my perspective, there's a absolutely huge opportunity is that every project will need some data scientist stroke analyst working with them. Yeah. I think at the moment, we're probably talking more analysts rather than data scientists, because I don't think the data's there and I don't think the appetite's there today to be able to drilling down into this data. I think as that data starts to build up and the competence grows across the industry, then I think we'll be into some really clever application of predictive analytics and things like that. I think it's bigger than that, actually. I think it's about transforming those projects. So it's not just about bringing them in on time, it's delivering them differently as well. So once you start to look at this, you can probably start to parallel up some of those activities, because you'll find out you're doing serial jobs at the moment because you're using sort of inefficient resources. And if you think about a construction site, for instance, if you're delivering a project on a construction site. You think that's the most optimal delivery schedule. If you can start to turn it around, and you look at efficient use of those resources, and you've got some Internet of Things, you've got some drones flying around, you can see where your workforce are, you can then start to replan it all based upon the really efficient use of those resources.
Yeah.
And that's using all the data science, which is then coming back and saying, our constraint in this project is not necessarily logistics, it's not necessarily the technical challenges, it's the efficient use of resources.
Yeah.
And not a lot of projects at the moment are delivering on the basis of lean resource utilization.
Yeah.
And I think once we start to exploit that, this is going to be game changing for a lot of those organizations.
Yeah, and you think of projects operating in silos, but you're saying it's more complicated than that. It's more involved. It's more involved in that, and so you have these interdependencies between these projects and multiple projects happening. And that's just not the way it's done these days. It's not. You might have a portfolio of projects, and you don't think of it managing that portfolio.
Yeah. So I think the portfolio approach, once you start to map that out as well, and I've done loads of work on portfolios before, and it's really difficult to get your head around all these connections, especially everything's moving at the same time, and that can be a massive challenge. Intellectually, it's really difficult, but once you start to apply a data science to it, it becomes a lot easier.
Oh, yes.
And I think the tools are there at the moment. It's just that they've not been implemented. It depends upon the organization and its project management maturity. If it's got the standard tool sets, things like Primavera 6 and Exactium and those sort of tools, then you can start to extract data and start to do some clever things with it. If you've got a very basic organization who's using spreadsheets, then I think there's going to be a data integration problem. So I think for me, the starting point is, what's the source of the data? What's its consistency? And once we start to fix some of that problem, we can then put it into Power BI and just do some very simple visualizations on that data and then start to understand it. Once you've got that and you start to take the board with you about the power of those analytics, it's moving past Power BI then, because Power BI for me starts to proliferate in terms of more and more dashboards.
Yeah.
And then once you get more and more dashboards, it's like flying a plane with loads of dials. You can't actually see what's going on.
That's beautiful. That is a fascinating area, and I can see that people would like to be involved, but both data scientists and probably project management professionals and also business leaders. What would you say? What would you say would be the sort of ways that they can get involved in what is probably fairly embryonic and early stage? An area. It's quite. I mean, you're probably leading the charge. You obviously know more about the space than anyone I've ever spoken to. But how would people get involved in this?
So I think it's a starting point. You just find a meetup. So it was 2 years ago. I couldn't find one. There's no such thing. There was various data science meetups out there, but there was nothing about project data science. And what we need to do is to bring the data scientists in the same room as the project management people.
Yeah.
So I set up this thing called the London Project Data Analytics Meetup, and that started in December 2017, and it's now up to 1,900 members. We're really pleased about that. So that's going some. And I've had some requests to take it nationwide across the UK as well. In due course, we can start to spin this out globally. So if there's some of your colleagues out there and listeners who would like to get involved and potentially take this global, give me a call, send me an email, get in touch with me, and we'll try and work this out and make it global.
But I was going to ask, in terms of the business and projecting success, so what are your goals for what is now a few days into the new year, 11 days into the year? What are your goals for 2019? Whereabouts are you looking at taking the organisation, and what sort of things do you have in mind?
Oh, it's just so exciting this year, Nick. We've got loads of things in the pipeline. So we're working on an apprenticeship, for instance. So we'd like to work with some organisations and start to develop 18 to 25-year-olds and start to pull them through, and they can do some of the groundwork in terms of data analytics, Power BI, those sort of work. and to build this capacity in the industry, because if the capacity is not there, we can't deliver this vision. So we're working on training programs, we're looking at C-suite training as well. We're looking at building out the meetup. We've got the hackathon going, so we've got something called Project Hack, which is held at the Microsoft Reactor 3 times a year. We can build that out as well, and that's more about some hands-on experience. We're looking at master classes, all that sort of stuff. So there's a big training part of the business, and we need that training part of the business because it grows capacity in the industry, and that enables us to deliver this a bolder vision. At the same time as that, we're doing some cool things. We're looking at data trust, for instance. So we're looking at building up this pool of data which we can then start to share. We're looking at some very clever algorithms associated with that as well. We've done some work on bid analytics. So for instance, we've taken loads and loads of bid data that we can find with Network Rail, which in the UK is responsible for the railway infrastructure. If you've now got a contract coming up through Network Rail, we can predict the winner of that contract with about 65% confidence. So it's doing cool things like that, where we've seen some opportunities in that data set, and then we can start to drill into it and to use some of our techniques.
Yeah.
So it's the full spectrum of a product type approach all the way through to developing the overall infrastructure and capacity in the market. If we don't do that, this is never going to change, because we'll be looking at small little niche applications of it. We need to change the market.
Yeah.
And if there's people out there who'd like to work with us on it, then please get in touch. Yeah, it's a great opportunity. And a small business like mine, you know, I can't do it all. Let's work together and let's make this happen. That's what the meetup's about as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. I love that you're giving back to the students, to educating business leaders. You're doing everything to create a massive movement and to really drive what is going to be, I'm confident it will be an absolutely transformative change in project management. It's a lofty goal. it's a really ambitious goal, but that's kind of, I think, what's needed. And it's,
it's a bold one. I think as a businessman as well, it's that trade between chasing the money and making sure you can keep the lights on versus going for this bolder dream of changing society, improving society, and making these things much better in the future. And for me, as a struggle in that balance, it's making sure you can keep the company going whilst it's in this bootstrapping stage, and then keeping your eye on this bigger prize of all this transformational change. And that's something which I'm wrestling with, and we've talked about it quite a lot, Nick.
Yeah.
It's something I wrestle with day in, day out, because if you focus a lot in terms of just in revenue, for instance, I could probably spend the rest of my life doing things like Power BI work. But for me, that's missing this overall opportunity and the chance to really make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think for me, in the sort of later stages of my working career, it's about making a difference now. That's what I want to do.